All right, guys, welcome back to another Real Talk episode. Today, we're going to be talking about my 11.5 obsession, collection, whatever you want to call it. Somehow, I just woke up one day and I came in possession of a lot of 11.5 uppers and complete pistols, rifles. And so let's just talk about that. The journey, the setups, the idea behind them. Some you haven't seen on the channel, really just one. A bunch you have seen on the channel, and just kind of talk about it. One honorable mention, it's really not an 11.5, it's a 12.5, but we're going to get into all of that shortly. But before we do, I want to take a moment to say thank you guys for all your support. I am doing this full time now, so if you do want to support the channel, head over to rangedaybro.com. You can pick up any merch we have. Also, while you're there, make sure you throw your email into the subscription box so that I can send you all of my content, any deals that we have coming out here on the channel that I work out with any of my subscribers or my providers, rather, my sponsors, so that you guys are staying in the know, and then I have a way to contact and stay in communication with you guys if the big tech platforms ever were to get rid of my channel, disappear. I already have one strike on the channel, so with that being said, if you guys go over there and subscribe to that, it'll kind of insulate me and give me a way to communicate with you guys if big tech ever decided to just erase me from the map. So I appreciate every single one of you guys for doing that. All the codes, all the rest of that stuff you can find over on rangedaybro.com. So we'll leave it right there. So let's start with the beginning and where the 11.5 journey started. And it really started with 10.3, the Mark 18. That's probably the one gun, even to this day, I have the most rounds on. I mean, that's like my early on, like the first 2 years, 3 years of really being into guns. I put, probably over 10 to 12,000 rounds through that Mark 18 upper. And that Daniel Defense upper was great, but what I lacked on it was the consistency out the distance, and that's where my obsession with the 11.5 kind of stemmed from. And it started with this guy right here. So the Sig Spear LT, chambered in 5.56. It's the 11.5. Obviously, I SBR'd this one featuring the SAS stock. And while I kind of go through these, I guess I'll just talk about the setups on these. And, I don't want to go through the whole lineup and go all the way back through to talk about the setup. So we'll just like very quickly hit on the setup of this guy. This is the EOTech EXPS 3-2, so it's a 2-dot EOTech. So it's got the circle, donut of death, and then 2 dots in there. I think it is calibrated for a 14.5. So the first dot is supposed to be zeroed at 5,200 yards, and the second dot is supposed to be your 500-yard hold. It does hold up pretty well on an 11.5, but this guy's got the Surefire 3-prong up here in the front, so I'm running my RC2 on here typically. I had it kitted out with a bunch of other stuff, but it got removed for upcoming reviews. One thing you might notice on here is the Griffin Armament iron sights, which are actually pretty legit. I don't like that you have to slide them on, and then there's a set screw that goes down in order to secure them in place, but they work. They're cheaper, I think. I'll have to double check on that. Somebody let me know down in the comments. I think they're cheaper than Magpul MBUS Pros, but they look great. They feel great. I just don't like the way you attach them. But it does have the SAS stock on here, which is my favorite 1913 folding stock. It's got a button. It's absolutely rock solid. It feels like something you'd put on like a precision rifle chassis. That's how solid this thing is. And it's got toolless adjustments for the cheek rise there, and then the length of pull as well. But it's already pretty long, so I run it all the way in, even though I'm a pretty tall guy. Everything else on here is stock. It's got the Unity riser for the EOTech for night vision, 100 Concepts ARD up front. Everything else on here is stock and has been stripped away to be on other builds that I use more now. And the reason being, this gun is massively popular. It's my most popular video on the channel was the review of this thing, so go check that video out if you want more information on this gun specifically. But this gun, as great as it is, it's just a little bit heavy for what it does. And again, I'm not like shitting on this thing. This is my first 11.5. But did it leave something to be desired? Absolutely. Once I had my can on here, if I had my magnifier on here, a light, if I put a laser on here, like it got really, really heavy because it's a short stroke gas piston system, which is great if you're running, full auto or FRT mode. But really for semi-auto, for like most civilians, like the benefits of having a short stroke gas piston, I think are just outweighed by the negatives, which is really the weight and it being front heavy. Now it does kind of delete the recoil a little bit, but there's more recoil because there's more mass moving. But it's kind of the same thing with a 416, right? The only benefit of this over a 416 is that you can fold it and shoot it if that's something that is important to you. To me, that's not quite that important. It is nice to be able to fold it for stowing it in a bag and whatnot. But yeah, anyways, it's got some rail scales and a Magpul thing on here. So after I got this, I kind of was like, I don't want to say I was disappointed, but I wanted to find something that did this as far as ballistics, but also was a lot lighter. And then therefore was my obsession with the URG-I was born. So from there, we went to this guy, which is a funny story behind this guy right here. So this is actually, and this is my first attempt at building the URG-I at home. So this is actually more clone correct than the Geissele URG-I because it has a Daniel Defense barrel in here. But this barrel is actually Daniel Defense SOCOM profile barrel that came with my SOCOM upper from Brownells, and it started as a 14.5. And I sent it off to Sons of Liberty Gunworks to have them do a pin and weld, and somehow it got over drilled and the drill bit went into the bore of the barrel, so it ruined the barrel. They did replace it for me with one of their own barrels, so good on them for doing that at least. But I was sitting here with this barrel that was unusable, 14.5 SOCOM profile, cold hammer forged, chrome line Daniel Defense barrel, and I wanted to use it to build this URG-I clone. So what I did was I sent it off to DWilsonmfg. He cut it from 14.5 down to 11.5. We left the gas port relatively the same size. I can't remember exactly what we ended up on, but we left the gas port to be, somewhat reliable without a suppressor, but more so like with military grade ammo, but with the lower pressured stuff, it might have issues from what I can recall. But essentially, he didn't overblow the gas port size to, obviously when you're changing the dwell time or changing the length of a barrel, you have to adjust the gas port because there's less dwell time. There's less time after the bullet passes the gas port for it to cycle the action properly. And this is I believe a carbine length gas system. So yeah, this is a carbine length gas system. So I had him leave the gas port relatively small, and therefore now we have this really thick cold hammer forged chrome line barrel, and everything else is, it's not exactly clone correct, but the barrel is, because the actual URG-I does use Daniel Defense barrels as far as I know. And so it's got a CAC Industries BCG, and this was really my first attempt at making one of these. But the only problem was with that super thick barrel profile, yeah, it's great for sustaining heavy rates of fire, so on and so forth. But the problem with it is it still kind of has the same issue as the Spear LT. It's a little front heavy because of that super thick, beefy barrel, which again, it's a trade-off. But so this thing shot pretty good. I got decent accuracy out of the barrel, even though it's a chrome. People say you can't cut down chrome line barrels. D. Wilson told me you can, and they did, and it got decent accuracy. I can't remember exactly, but if I'm recalling, probably about under 2 inches. 1.5 inches would probably be my guess for this guy. But I am running this thing with a Surefire RC2, Surefire three-prong flash hider. We have the Surefire Light, I guess it's a Surefire advertisement, with the Connect Development Group little quick detach mount for M-LOK. And this thing's great for being able to move lights around. Is it rock solid? No, it's definitely not rock solid. And over time, it's definitely loosened up. So, but for my purposes, for the range, like if this was my one fighting rifle, would I be using that? No, I wouldn't. I would have a direct mount or either pick or M-LOK. But it's great for being able to move it around quickly to different rifles if I'm going out to hunt or whatever and I want a light on the gun. But it's got the Mark 16 rail, which is clone correct. It's not the NSF. It doesn't have the NSN numbers on here, so it's not like true clone correct. And it's got a Geissele tan upper that I got from my local gun store for like $50. The guy didn't want it, so I got a really smoking deal on this thing. And so again, not exactly clone correct, but it was my first attempt at making the URG-I at home because I didn't, they weren't in stock and I didn't have the money to buy one, off tax swap or whatever. So I kind of Geissele blem rail, got the upper for really cheap, and then CAC Industries sent me their BCG. This is their regular chrome line with the sand cutters. So they sent me this BCG. So I only had to buy a few parts to complete this build. And so this was my first attempt. Geissele blem, airborne charging handle, which nothing wrong with blems. Always buy blems, but I just don't like that it's OD green, but who cares? It works. I can paint it if I really wanted to. But this was my second attempt. This thing, again, EOTech. This has the EXPS 3-1, so single dot reticle, no donut of death. I really like that. It also has the G45 magnifier featuring the 100 Concepts ARD up front and the HRF, like, I don't know what you call this thing, but the protective. It got rid of that rubberized thing around the EOTech, and it's like a 3D printed, pretty. It protects the windage and elevation adjustments, which just centers up the dot. It actually doesn't change your zero, but anyways, that's on the Unity riser and flip the center magnifier. And besides that, Geissele trigger, standard mil-spec lower, and SBA 3 brace. But that's pretty much it. Magpul K2 grip. And after I got this thing, I had been garnering a lot of attention from these builds. And so Geissele had reached out to me and said, hey, we appreciate you, featuring our products. Would you be interested in featuring Super Duty? And I was like, well, I'm more interested in the URG-I. And the guy was like, well, the Super Duty is better in my opinion, and here's why. And so then we fast forward to the main pipe hitter right here, which is the URG-I, or sorry, the Super Duty 11.5 upper that you see right here. So they actually sent this one out. So Geisley sent this upper receiver out after I had done a few videos on the Spear LT and then the URG-I at home. And then I kind of compared the URG-I at home to the Spear LT, and they sent this upper out. And initially I was kind of bummed out because I really wanted the URG-I. I like the two-tone with a black upper receiver. I just like the URG-I because it's clone correct, right? Or more clone correct. But when they sent this one out, I realized very quickly that this has a ton of benefits over the URG-I line. In particular, the barrel profile being a Geisley profile, being thicker in the back, tapering down towards the front. It's getting rid of the issues that I have with the Spear LT and the super thick annual defense barrel, but also still giving me the benefit of it being cold hammer forged and chrome lined. The cam pin, the BCG itself has some improvements. There's an upper receiver, there's improvements on the upper receiver, and you guys can watch my whole review on this Super Duty or the 12.5 Super Duty. They're pretty much the same exact thing. This is a carbine length gas system. It is tuned. I have an H2 buffer in here with a braided buffer wire spring and weight. And yeah, I mean, this thing absolutely blew me away. I shot a sub-inch group with it, actually multiple sub-inch groups with it. For being a cold hammer forged chrome line barrel, that's pretty impressive. And yeah, it just kind of blew me away. It was a great balance. It ran flawlessly. I've had still to this day 0 malfunctions with it. And so, and the fit and finish is just Geisley quality. Also, the rail itself gets rid of the 2 tabs on the bottom here and the top on both sides, and it incorporates a HK style male to female connection there. And also it has these steel reinforced QD cups on the Mark 16 rail. So there was a lot of things about this upper that kind of just stole my heart away, and I really fell in love with this thing. And so, yeah, before we move on, let's just talk about the setup. So we're running the Energetic Armament Ferox. It's actually 6mm can up front. I really love this can. I do work for them for full disclosure. And full disclosure, they did send me this, Geisley sent me this upper. They also sent me, Energetic did send me this can for full disclosure, but it's quickly become my favorite can because of its weight, size. You just forget it's there. It's so light. I think it's like 12.9 ounces. And when you direct thread it, it stays super short and compact, and it just works. It's not a low back pressure can, but it has low back pressure qualities. Let's put it that way. So anyways, we're running the Surefire Mini Vampire up here with the 100 Concepts Light Cap Pro. We have the Steiner CQBL up front. We have just a pick section for running on the tripod work and bipod work. Well, bipod, I'd move it up to the front. We have an Arkin Optics mount with a Trijicon Credo 1:8 on the top there for the glass. This wasn't the optic that started on this gun, but when we got the 12.5, which we'll get into later, I did move the EOTech 1:10 from this gun to that gun, and then I had done some switching around of optics, and this guy landed from the Scar 17 on the 11.5, and I actually really like it. I do wish Arkin had the option to put a top dot on here, which they don't, so I might switch this mount out for one that does have that option. I love the Badger Condition 1 mounts. Those are my favorite, but this is what I'm running right now. It's got a locking top, elevation and windage adjustment, which is really cool, and it has red and green illumination. I really love this optic. I had it for a long time. There's a new version of this out. The only thing I wish it had was wind holds. The new one does have wind holds, but I've never used it, so I can't speak to it. But that's the optic of choice. Does have the airborne charging handle. This one has the Geisley BCG, Reliability Enhanced BCG, which we've talked about at length on the channel. We have the Maritime Bolt Catch, a Geisley G2S trigger, and Radian selector. This is the Geisley A17 grip, Geisley buffer tube, buffer spring and weight, and a SBA 4 brace on here. So that's the setup of this guy. But essentially, this guy really scratched the itch, really kind of upped my intrigue in reviewing more Geisley products. Because I mean, I already was a fan of Geisley. Like I have a Geisley trigger in my Scar and my HK, Geisley rails on both of my Mr. rifles. So I've been a huge fan of Geisley for years, but this is the first time I really got a complete upper receiver from them to review, and it kind of stole my heart. So moving from there, again, it kind of garnered the attention of another company that I've already mentioned for their BCG, but the CAC Industries 11.5 was the next 11.5 that we built. And it started with their BCGs, but then they told me they're coming out with a suppressor-only H-bar profile, deep-fluted stainless steel, 1-in-5 twist barrel. And I was like, huh, that's pretty interesting. I've never heard of anything faster than a 1-in-7. So I asked them if they'd be willing to send one out. They were. They sent it. and born was this upper receiver. Again, Geisley rail. CAC sent me their rail. I just wasn't in love with it. Here, I'll show you guys right now, actually. And this is nothing against the rail because I've literally never used it, but any rail that kind of has that generic bump out on the bottom, it's just a big turnoff for me. I just don't like the way it looks aesthetically. I know that sounds pretty petty, but I'm just being honest. Aesthetics are important for me, and it's not everything, obviously. Reliability is everything, but aesthetics are just what they are. Again, Geisley Blem rail, got it for very cheap during their Blem sale, so why not put a Mark 16 on here? I love the look of the URG-I, so this is my most URG-I looking upper if you don't stare at the barrel too long, it being stainless steel. But yeah, again, Mark 16 rails, you have the two tabs at the top and the bottom here. We are running the CAC downward venting BCG along with their suppressor only barrel, airborne charging handle, Arkin 1 to 8 in the Arkin scope mount. And this is just to protect the threads. I don't use chemo anymore if I can avoid it. I really don't enjoy it. I don't like it. I don't recommend it anymore. There's just too many other good options that don't increase the weight and the length of your suppressors. So this is just a placeholder to protect the threads. But essentially, getting this thing absolutely was like the softest shooting URG-I or 11.5 that I owned. It was super soft shooting because it was tuned. It has a suppressed only barrel, so the gas port is very small in order to keep that gas coming back into the system when you're running a suppressor at a minimum. So with that, with the downward venting BCG and with the CAC weights and springs, you know, depending on what suppressor you're using, if you're using like a super high back pressure, polonium or whatever, then obviously you can use a heavier weight and a heavier spring. I was using the Ferox, and so with the Ferox, you needed a lighter spring and weight. I just used a mil-spec spring and a H buffer, so the lightest of the options that they had. And so, but even with that super light weight and spring, or super light, the standard, lightest weight and spring they offer, and the Ferox, this thing like barely recoiled whatsoever. I was not like incredibly impressed with the accuracy. It was definitely acceptable accuracy. I expected a little bit better out of this, but in all fairness, I only put 2 ammo types through it for groups, 77 grain AAC and 77 grain IMI. So with both of those, it was grouping about 1.5 inches at 100 yards, which is definitely acceptable. I was thinking stainless steel barrel, super thick profile. I'm thinking like 1/2 inch groups, but I don't know, maybe the 1 in 5 twist rate. The reason that, and most of you guys might be wondering, why 1 in 5? And I was told by CAC that it's to encourage tumbling, which is where 5.56 gets its like lethality or its performance from, especially at these shorter barrels. Like when the bullet tumbles, it's what causes the permanent and temporary wound cavities, or the permanent wound cavities. I think the temporary is caused by the velocity, but I'm not a ballistics expert. I don't shoot gel all the time, so take it with a grain of salt. But that's what they told me. It was to encourage the yawing and the turning on target. And it makes sense, but this thing shot absolutely dog shit with 55 grain, as to be expected, because it's such a lightweight. The faster the twist rate, the heavier bullet you need in order to optimize that twist rate. So with 77 grains, which is the heaviest you can find commercially available on the shelf, it shot pretty decent, 1.5 inches. Again, I wasn't blown away with it because I was just expecting a lot more, but it's got a very long gas system. I believe this is mid-length. So like the gas block ends right here at the front, so it's like literally 1 inch away from the end of the barrel. But it ran great. I mean, no malfunctions. It was super soft shooting. It accomplished the task that it was designed to accomplish. And with that being said, one of the people commented on the video, well, I just don't like that because if your can goes down, then your rifle goes down. And that is something you have to accept with the suppressor only type gun, or you're going to be, manually, it's going to be a bolt action gun at that point, right? So that's something you have to understand if you're going to get into something like this. Again, if you're going to use it for your one rifle to do everything, would you want to use this? Maybe not. But is it an innovative idea? Yes, and I love that. I love that. It was a super low gas to the face, super low recoiling, highly tuned system. So for somebody, if that's important to you, then this is definitely an upper or a build that I consider. CAC Industries and all their BCGs. If I wasn't already overfilled with BCGs, I mean, if I had a new build I was working on, I mean, their downward venting or even their regular side venting chrome line with the sand cutters is just super high quality. And yeah, I mean, it's just, I really like their BCGs. They have dual ejectors as well. So I put that BCG, my Mark 18, the side venting and the downward venting, and it went from like 2 o'clock ejection on the Mark 18 with the Polonium K to like a perfect pile of brass at 4 o'clock, which was just nice to see. I mean, any kind of consistency to me means that the system is running optimally, and you're probably not, wearing your parts out as much. Even though it's the same amount of gas coming back in, it seemed to handle it better. So that's my 2 cents on this guy. We spent enough time talking about it. And then lastly, something that hasn't been shown on the channel quite yet is this guy right here from Griffin Armament. This guy they sent out for review, and I haven't had a chance to get it to the range quite yet. But this is their 11.5, and it has some really cool things about it. In particular, the lower receiver is a very cool ambidextrous lower. It's got the lever type that I like, and the coolest part about it is, as far as I know, it's not ridiculously overpriced. So I really like that. It's completely ambi, selector, magazine release also on this side of the gun, and then also bolt catch, bolt release as well on the right side. So you can just clear malfunction very easily. Ambidextrous charging handle, all that good stuff, and you can release it just like that. So I haven't had a chance to take it out to the range, so I put 0 rounds through this yet, but I got it outfitted with Otter Creek Labs Polonium K and 5.56. For full disclosure, they did send this to the channel. I'm a big fan of this can. It's great. A little bit of a higher back pressure can, but if you understand that, for the money, it's a really good can. But again, this is all their stuff. So Griffin's rail, their barrel, apparently they make all this in-house. Even their plastic parts are injection molded in-house. Apparently, I think they have their own molds. But yeah, I mean, just a really cool upper, really a really cool lower. The upper, I can't really say much about it yet, but their BCG, yeah, selector, ambidextrous, pretty snappy. I like it. I like a snappy selector. Triggers like a mil spec, but it feels pretty smooth. Again, don't even know what buffer weight they're running in here, to be honest with you. Looks like some kind of special buffer where it's got like a little tube in the middle. I don't know if you guys can see that. Right there. Let's see here. Get this guy in focus. It's got like a little, I don't know what you'd call that, little cutout in the middle. You guys, it's deciding not to focus. Let me see if I can manually focus this. There we go. It's got a little cutout in the middle. Don't know what that's for, what that causes. I got to do some research on that. But yeah, that's this guy I haven't shot yet. So I'm excited to try it out, see how it performs, see how it groups, and yeah, come back to you guys. But apparently I've become the 11.5 guy because look at this shit. It's everywhere. But lastly, I'll just talk about the setup real quick. Talk about the Otter Creek already. Completely, stock otherwise gun, and then the Magpul QD up here on the top. We also have a Trijicon TA31, the standard 4X, I think it's TA31, with the Unity mount, and I have it all the way back. So for the eye relief, as you guys know, ACOG eye relief is very short. And then also we have the offset holosun there for doing up close personal work. It's actually on the 1.3 offset for the Unity mount. So big fan of that, really quick. I've used it on my Block 2 for a long time. We just switched it over to this guy because we need to have a review on this guy. But yeah, that's kind of the progression and where it sits today. And I mentioned the honorable mention for the 12.5 because I kind of put them in the same ballpark as far as like how I think they can be effective. And we've talked about this between the Geisley Super Duty uppers that I have. The velocity difference is very minor, let's say. It's a very small velocity difference. So unless you need the rail space, unless you want extra dwell time, because this is still a carbine length gas system, so the gas block is up here. And this has been my main squeeze, my nightstand gun for a minute now since I got it. I've been doing testing ongoing with this, but I'm going to do a video, and this is foreshadowing, comparing the 11.5 Super Duty to the 12.5. And so I kind of want your guys' feedback. What is the most important thing you want to see showcased in that review? Is it group size? Is it velocity? Is it shooting out the distance? Is it specifically going over like up close B-roll of, I don't know, the gas block, showing things like the little minor details in the specs, which they're pretty much identical. So that'd be kind of a difficult thing to kind of focus on, I guess. But like, what do you guys want to see in a review like that? And so again, the 12.5 has kind of been the main squeeze lately, and it is still a really great balanced gun. Like it doesn't feel much larger. You can definitely tell it's a little bit larger than the 11.5. That 1 inch, when you push everything out on the front of the gun an inch further out, it may not seem like a lot, but it does make a little bit of a difference when you're running this for long periods of time, especially for when you're doing all kinds of low ready, high ready stuff, transitioning from target to target. You can definitely feel it a little bit. But if you never had them to shoot them side by side, if I shot this one day and then I just waited a week and then went and shot the 11.5, I probably wouldn't notice the difference. But shooting them back to back, I kind of do, as far as like splitting hairs. But then I got the 12.5, and that's where we've been since the 12.5. So that's kind of the summary on the history of the 11.5 and how I've somehow become the 11.5 guy. But I do love the 11.5. So, and foreshadowing, potentially, maybe once we go take these out and shoot them to range, if I can easily get hits on a reduced season target at 455 yards with 11.5, just as easily with 11.5 than I could with the 12.5, then I don't really know why I would still remain keep the 12.5 or as my main squeeze. I'm definitely keeping it, but to keep it as my main go-to rifle, if the 11.5 can do everything that this can do. So can it do it as well? How is it going to be affected by the wind? All questions I can answer in that review. But I wanted to bring this to you guys to kind of summarize the 11.5 collection and kind of how far it's come and where we're at with it. And then if you guys have any questions specifically on any one of these builds in particular, let me know. I know someone did comment about wanting a video on what optic choice I recommend for the 11.5, and that's kind of why I have the EOTech, or sorry, the Trijicon ACOG on the Griffin, because, you know, I have, right now it's really LPVO or EOTech. That's with a magnifier. That's kind of the options I got on my Spear LT. This URG-I at home and the two Super Duties are both running a 1:8 and a 1:10. So what about a prism optic, and what better than like the most infamous prism optic ever, the ACOG? So if that's interesting to the rest of you guys, let me know down in the comments as well. And that's kind of maybe a real talk episode. I don't know if we need to do like a full review. If we did a full review, I would like to do like the COD mount on all of these, which kind of puts the phone right behind the optic. It's just difficult to get it lined up. It's really a pain in the ass, honestly. And so it would just take a lot of time to do that type of review. But if you guys find value in it, then I'll do it. But I might just make it a real talk where I kind of talk about my experiences. But with that being said, again, big shout out to Brownells, biggest sponsor of the channel. They just sent out these hit indicators from Hornady. Actually, my boy Mountains Malts America is the one who recommended these to me. I asked him what he uses, and he can see these clearly like out to a mile, he said. So for the price, I think it was like $44 for 5 of these. So I'm pretty impressed with just what his results he's had. Now, hopefully I can avoid shooting one of these, but otherwise very cheap compared to like the alternatives for hit indicators. I didn't even know these existed. So big shout out to Brownells, and shout out to my boy Mountains Malts America. Go subscribe to his channel. You won't be disappointed if you like long range shooting. That's kind of his specialty. So, but with that being said, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. If you have any other questions, let me know down in the comments below. Head over to rangedaybro.com, put your email in so we can stay in touch. I can send you deals. All my affiliate codes and everything is over there as well. Also, just liking, commenting, subscribing is a huge help, guys. Sharing these videos means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. And drink a lot of water. Christ is king. Until next time, love you guys. Take care of yourselves.